Gary, why don't you talk a little bit about the Knight Foundation and your funding operations like this? What do you look for in an organization that's looking for money?
Okay. You mentioned Voice of San Diego earlier, and that is one of the organizations that Knight Foundation is also funding, along with others. And of course, Voice of San Diego was started because there was a wealthy millionaire in town who was frustrated with the main newspaper there, and felt that it was not serving the needs of the community, and that just his economic well-being was not being served because he wasn't getting the information he needed about the community, or about what he felt was probably let's just say things that needed looking into by journalists. And so he found some journalists who wanted to do exactly that, start investigative reporting. And so I want to talk about three different models that we funded. There are many more models, but of ones that we have funded that you could look and check out online, Voice of San Diego is one of them. And what this one focused on in particular was the topic of investigative reporting in San Diego. So they don't do sports. There are probably many topics that they don't do, but they do focus on city government and county government and business and the military and things that have major effects on life in San Diego. So they started with funding from a millionaire. They got a lot of money. He has said that he will decrease that amount of money every year so that they have to wean themselves off of him and onto a business model of some sort. And what they're finding right now is that the choice of the topics that they have had, and the fact that they have broken news that has resulted in significant stories that I think probably got picked up by other media in the area also, is working for them. Another model is MinnPost, and that's in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And that is started by Joel Kramer, the former editor of the Minneapolis Star Tribune. That model is a combination of subscription and advertising and donors all put together, and trying to see what, either does one of those revenue streams work better than another, or do you need all of those streams? But I think the key there is that it's multiple revenue streams, and it's advertising, subscriptions, donations, and I would suppose maybe one of these days charging for premium content. But they're trying multiple models. The St. Louis Beacon is also formed by ex-editors and reporters of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, who have paired up with NPR in St. Louis to try to share news and information, so take advantage of what NPR has to offer, but at the same time offer much more localized information about St. Louis itself. So those three are different ways of doing it. And then I read today that in Washington, D.C., the former editor of WashingtonPost.com is starting a new local site. And what they're going to do is there's another wealthy guy in D.C. who happens to own 2 TV stations there, and so eventually they're going to combine those 2 TV stations along with this new publication that is starting. They'll have one local Washington D.C. site, but they also are focusing only on topics that they believe will affect people's lives. Now, that might or might not be the Redskins, I don't know. But it's definitely going to be transportation, it's going to be education, it's going to be politics. And also, I should also mention that the guy who owns those 2 TV stations also owns Politico.com, which is doing a big job of reporting politics, news, and information in Washington, D.C. So the idea there, again, is to focus on specific topics that affect people's lives that are not being covered by the mainstream media. And then I think perhaps another model that we're seeing here and watching develop here is the Miami Herald's community news network, which we think is very interesting to watch in the fact that you've got a major newspaper working with individuals in communities and trying to tie in the strengths of the Miami Herald, the strengths of innovations that they are trying out that happen to be some of the ones that Knight Foundation funds, and the strengths of individuals who know their communities and are passionate about their communities, tying it all together into a unified whole that will be easy to use because of database mashups with maps and combining information and maps and locations and events. So I guess the first thing I would say is that there are multiple models of ways to do this. There is no one way to fund this, and therefore you should be open to all sorts of multiple revenue streams. And I would say something else, that people who come from news organizations who try to start independent their own news organizations may not be as comfortable with partnering with others as people who come to this first from, I would say, an online or digital background. By that I mean, coming from AOL survives on partnerships. You can't do anything on AOL, or you can't do anything on an aggregator if you don't have a partnership. So for us, partnering is not a bad word, it's a good word. And for a traditional journalist, partnering sounds like giving up, and sounds like you're not, you're supposed to be competing, not partnering. But in this day and age, you have to really, truly rethink what your values are, and do your traditional values hold you back? And I would argue that in many cases, they have at least significantly delayed the news industry from modernizing. They have kept the news industry from modernizing. For instance, credibility. Who's going to argue with the fact that news organizations have credibility? That's what they sell, that's what they do, and they better protect it and preserve it. But you can take that argument to the extreme that says, therefore, we should never have public comments on our website, because unless we can vet every one of them, we endanger the credibility of the, let's say, the Miami Herald or the Washington Post. And actually, this is a true story. It was the Washington Post. And it endangers the credibility of the Washington Post. So therefore, the thing we have to protect and sell is credibility. Let's not have comments. And basically the public reaction to that was, okay, fine, I'll go to somewhere where there are comments. The local bloggers, the local weeklies, anybody else, because what they ignored was the fact that it's sort of like in Jurassic Park, where the science guy, I forgot his name, says that, in essence, life finds a way. And it's the same thing. We have this desire, this need to communicate, and now that we have the tools that let us do it, life finds a way. And if you on the major news site are not going to let me communicate with others, and not going to let me network, and not going to let me use all of the technology at hand that I like to either get information or to make my life easier, then I will find a way to do that elsewhere. And that's what people have done, and you certainly can't say that the circulation of the Washington Post has done anything but go down for the past 20 years.
How much money has the Knight Foundation given out so far in grants to start? Grants to journalism since its founding in 1950 is $400 million. Grants to media innovation, as we're calling it, trying to find some way to lump in the variety of experiments and innovations that we fund in the past 4 years, is $100 million.